blood under the lights was never part of the show. Yet that night, as Freddie Mercury stepped into the spotlight, something was unmistakably wrong. A dark mark near his hairline, a bandage hastily hidden, a tension in his movements that fans had never seen before. Whispers spread through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Fear replaced excitement. Had Freddie Mercury been seriously injured? Was the show about to be canceled? Or worse, was he hiding something far more dangerous than anyone realized? What happened next stunned the audience, silenced the rumors, and revealed a side of Freddie Mercury that proved why he was more than a rock legend. He was fearless in ways no one expected. Before this story ends, you'll discover how the injury happened, why Freddie refused to stop the show, and the unexpected moment that turned fear into unforgettable admiration. This is one of the most tense and emotional moments in Freddie Mercury's career, and it changed how fans saw him forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Freddie Mercury. The night was supposed to be flawless. The stadium pulsed with energy as thousands of fans packed shoulder to shoulder, chanting Freddie Mercury's name long before the lights dimmed. Queen had played this venue before, conquered crowds like this countless times. The ritual was familiar, predictable, safe, but backstage, something had already gone terribly wrong. Freddie Mercury sat in front of the mirror in his dressing room, a white towel pressed firmly against the side of his head. The fabric was already stained red. A stage light flickered above him, illuminating the sharp tension in his jaw and the way his fingers trembled just slightly as he applied pressure. "Just a scratch," he muttered, though no one had asked. A medic knelt beside him. Concern etched across her face. "Freddie, this isn't nothing," she said carefully. "You hit your head hard. We need to clean it properly. You might need stitches." The injury had happened minutes earlier, a rush moment backstage, a misplaced step, a collision with a low metal beam hidden in the shadows. A stupid accident, the kind that never made headlines. Except this one had happened to Freddie Mercury. Blood had spilled immediately. Freddie hated the sight of it, not because it hurt. Pain had never frightened him, but because blood meant vulnerability. It meant reality intruding where illusion was meant to reign. "How long?" he asked, eyes fixed on his reflection. "At least 20 minutes, the medic replied. "And honestly, you shouldn't go on until we're sure you're not concussed." Outside the dressing room, the noise swelled. The crowd was getting restless. A chant rose, rhythmic and impatient. Freddie's heart tightened, not from fear, but from urgency. "No," he said quietly. "We go on." The medic hesitated. "Freddie." "I said we go on," he repeated, firmer now. "Tape it. Wrap it. Do whatever you need. But I'm not canceling." Brian May appeared in the doorway, his face instantly serious when he saw the blood. "What happened?" Freddie smiled faintly, tried to fight the stage. "Lost." Brian didn't laugh. "You're bleeding." "Details." Freddie waved off. Brian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't funny. If the fans see—" "They won't," Freddie interrupted. "Not unless I want them to." The medic finished cleaning the wound, applying a tight bandage that disappeared beneath Freddie's dark hair. Still, a faint red line lingered near his temple, barely visible, but unmistakable under bright lights. Freddie stood, testing his balance. The room swayed for half a second. He steadied himself. "See," he said lightly. "Perfectly alive?" Brian searched his face. "You sure?" Freddie met his eyes. "I've never been more certain." The lights dimmed. The opening notes thundered through the stadium. Freddie stepped onto the stage. At first, the crowd exploded in joy, pure, deafening joy. But then something shifted. Fans in the front rows leaned forward. Whispers spread like electricity. "Is he hurt? Look at his head. Is that blood?" Under the unforgiving glare of the spotlights, the mark was impossible to fully hide. A faint crimson stain near his hairline caught the light as he moved. Cameras zoomed in. Screens magnified it. Fear rippled through the audience. Freddie felt it immediately. He adjusted the microphone stand and smiled, not his playful grin, but something sharper. Defiant, the band launched into the first song. Freddie sang with force, his voice slicing through the night with familiar power. But beneath the sound, his head throbbed, a dull, pulsing ache that refused to be ignored. Still, he didn't miss a note. Between verses, he caught sight of fans pressing hands to their mouths. Some pointed. Others looked genuinely scared. This wasn't the usual chaos. This was concern. Freddie felt something twist in his chest. He had built his career on spectacle, on being untouchable. And now, a single accident had cracked the illusion wide open. As the song ended, the applause came. But it was different, uneven, nervous. Freddie stepped forward, lifting a hand for silence. The stadium obeyed. "I see you looking," he said calmly, tapping the side of his head with one finger. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. "Yes," Freddie continued, voice steady. "I'm bleeding." The fans froze. "But don't worry," he added, a hint of fire in his eyes. "If a little blood could stop me, I wouldn't be standing here." The crowd erupted, not just cheering now, but relieved laughter, applause mixed with admiration. Yet, backstage, panic intensified. Crew members exchanged worried glances. Medics hovered near the wings. Someone whispered that if Freddie collapsed, the liability would be catastrophic. Freddie felt the pressure building, not from the injury, but from expectation. He knew he was pushing himself. He knew the risk. And still, something inside him refused to back down. As the set continued, the pain sharpened. Lights blurred at the edges of his vision. The music felt louder, heavier. Sweat mixed with blood beneath the bandage, warm and unsettling. Mid-song, Freddie stumbled, just slightly. The crowd gasped. He caught himself instantly, turning the moment into a dramatic spin, raising the microphone high like a challenge. The audience roared, unsure whether they'd just witnessed danger or brilliance. Freddie smiled again. Inside, his pulse hammered. How long could he keep this up? Was he being brave or reckless? As the band prepared to launch into the next song, Freddie felt a sudden wave of dizziness roll through him. Stronger than before. The stadium lights flared. The sound surged. And for the first time that night, Freddie Mercury felt the world tilt dangerously out of control. What happened next? The moment that turned fear into awe would define this night forever. The dizziness didn't fade. Freddie Mercury stood at the center of the stage, gripping the microphone stand a little tighter than usual, waiting for the next cue. The stadium lights burned hotter now, sharper, cutting into his vision. The crowd's roar came in waves, loud, distant, then suddenly overwhelming, as if sound itself were bending around him. He blinked hard. Focus, he told himself. Just focus. The band launched into the next song, and Freddie stepped forward on instinct alone. His body knew the choreography, even if his head protested. He moved, he sang, he commanded. But beneath every movement was a persistent throb at his temple, a reminder that blood was still seeping beneath the bandage. In the front rows, fans exchanged uneasy glances. Some cheered louder, as if volume could protect him. Others watched in silence, hands clasped tightly, eyes locked on the darkened stain near his hairline. This wasn't normal concern. This was fear. A young woman near the barricade leaned toward her friend. "He doesn't look right," she whispered. On the giant screen above the stage, the camera cut to a close-up. Freddie's face filled the stadium. Sweat glistened on his skin. His eyes burned with intensity, but also something else. Strain. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Backstage, the medic stood frozen near the wings, headset pressed to her ear. "He's pushing too hard," she said urgently. "We need to stop this if he shows any more symptoms." The tour manager shook his head, panic and logistics colliding. If we stop him now, the crowd could riot. Brian may glance back repeatedly, his fingers moving automatically over his guitar strings. He had seen Freddie hurt before, twisted ankles, bruised ribs, exhaustion masked by laughter. This was different. Freddie missed a lyric. Just one word. The band barely noticed. The crowd didn't notice at all. Brian did. His stomach tightened. Freddie adjusted his grip on the microphone, turning the stumble into a dramatic pause. The crowd cheered, believing it intentional. Freddie fed off it, lifting his chin, summoning strength from their voices. But inside, his thoughts began to blur. For a fleeting second, the stadium lights dissolved into white haze. He felt weightless, not powerful, but unanchored. The song ended, applause crashing over him like a wave. Freddie forced a smile. He stepped toward the front of the stage again, raising a hand. The noise softened. "I see the worry," Freddie said, voice steady but lower now. "You're all staring at my head like it's about to fall off." Laughter rippled nervously through the crowd. "Relax," he continued. "If I'm going to collapse, it won't be from a little drama." The crowd cheered, louder now, but the fear didn't leave. It only hid itself behind applause. Brian leaned toward Roger during the next instrumental break. "He's not okay." Roger nodded. "I know." They exchanged a look neither liked. Freddie paced the stage slowly, conserving energy. Each step sent a dull echo of pain through his skull. His vision narrowed at the edges again, and he stopped suddenly, placing one foot forward, steadying himself. The audience inhaled collectively. He turned it into a pose, arm raised, microphone lifted, and the stadium exploded with cheers. Freddie smiled. Inside, his heart hammered. Not yet, he thought. Not here. As the next song began, Freddie felt something shift. The fear in the audience had changed. It was no longer passive. Fans near the front began holding up signs. "Stop the show. We care about you. Please be safe." Freddie saw them. His throat tightened. He had never expected this. Not concern strong enough to challenge the spectacle. For years, fans had wanted him louder, wilder, more dangerous. Tonight, they wanted him alive. The realization struck harder than the injury. Midway through the song, Freddie walked toward the piano, slower than usual. He sat down, resting both hands on the keys. The crowd hushed instinctively. His head swam. For a moment, he considered stopping, calling the medic, ending the show. The thought felt like surrender, but also like relief. He closed his eyes. Then he thought of the fans, thousands of them, watching not for perfection, but for truth. He thought of the way their fear had replaced excitement, how they had stayed instead of turning away. Freddie opened his eyes. He began to play. The song was softer, stripped down. His voice carried less force, but more weight. Every lyric felt intimate now, exposed. The pain sharpened his focus instead of dulling it. As he sang, something extraordinary happened. The crowd sang back, not overpowering, not chaotic, but gently, carefully, as if afraid to push him too far. They matched his volume, his pace. They followed him. Freddie felt it, the shift from performer to shared moment, from spectacle to connection. A tear mixed with sweat at the corner of his eye. By the final note, the stadium was silent. Then the applause rose, slow at first, then overwhelming. Not celebration. Respect. Freddie stood, breathing hard, hand briefly touching the side of his head. The dizziness returned stronger this time. His knees weakened. Brian stepped closer instinctively. Freddie waved him off, gently, almost gratefully. "I'm still here," Freddie said into the microphone, voice quieter than before. "And so are you. That's what matters." The crowd roared. But backstage, alarms were blaring, figuratively and literally. The medic grabbed her kit and ran toward the stage. Because something had changed. The blood had begun to seep through the bandage again. And Freddie Mercury could feel the strength draining faster than he was willing to admit. As the lights dimmed for the next song, Freddie took a step forward, and the world tilted violently. For the first time that night, he didn't recover immediately. The crowd screamed. Brian lunged toward him. And in that suspended second between collapse and control, the entire stadium held its breath. What Freddie Mercury would do next would turn panic into legend. The scream rippled through the stadium like a shockwave. When Freddie Mercury staggered forward, just one unguarded step too many, time fractured. The music faltered. Brian may lunge instinctively, his guitar swinging awkwardly as he reached out. Roger's sticks froze midair. The lights continued their programmed sweep, cruelly unaware that the show had crossed into something dangerous. Freddie's knees buckled. But he did not fall. He caught himself against a microphone stand, both hands gripping it so tightly his knuckles burned white. His head dipped forward, hair falling across his face, hiding the bandage now darkened beneath the lights. For half a second, no one breathed. Then Freddie straightened. Slowly, deliberately, the crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in desperate relief. Cheers collided with cries. Some fans shouted his name as if anchoring him to the earth. Others pleaded for him to stop. Brian leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Freddie, that's enough. We need to stop." Freddie didn't answer immediately. His ears rang. The world still tilted at an unnatural angle. He tasted iron at the back of his throat. The injury throbbed violently now, each heartbeat echoing like a drumbeat inside his skull. But beneath the pain, something else rose. Defiance. He lifted his head and met Brian's eyes. There was no confusion there. No panic. Only clarity sharpened by danger. "Not yet," Freddie said quietly. Brian's jaw tightened. "You could collapse." Freddie's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then let me collapse standing." Brian had no answer for that. Freddie turned back to the audience. The lights caught his face again, revealing what he could no longer hide. Blood had seeped through the bandage, tracing a thin line along his temple. It was unmistakable now. Gasps spread through the crowd. Freddie raised a hand, not theatrically, but gently. "I know," he said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "You're scared." The stadium fell silent. "I am too," he continued, surprising even himself with the honesty of the words. "But fear doesn't mean we disappear. It means we decide what matters." The crowd listened, truly listened. "I promise you this," Freddie said. "I won't pretend I'm invincible. I never was." A murmur rippled through the stands. "But I am here," he added, voice firming. "And if you'll stay with me, I'll stay with you." The response was immediate, deafening. Thousands of voices rose, not demanding more spectacle, but offering support. It wasn't adoration now. It was solidarity. Backstage, the medic clenched her jaw. "He shouldn't be talking," she muttered, even as her eyes softened. "But listen to them." On stage, Freddie felt something extraordinary happen. The pain hadn't lessened, but it had shifted. The fear no longer felt isolating. It felt shared. He turned back toward the piano. Brian hesitated, then followed. Roger nodded once, except in the moment. John adjusted his bass, grounding himself. Freddie sat down slowly, every movement deliberate. He pressed one hand briefly against his temple, steadying the world. The first notes rang out, simple, bare, unforgiving. Freddie sang. His voice was not as powerful as before. It cracked once, then steadied. The song became something else entirely, not a performance, but confession offered to thousands. The crowd sang with him again, softer this time, as if afraid to hurt him with sound. Freddie closed his eyes between lines, riding the edge of consciousness with focus born of will alone. He knew the risk. He felt the drain. He also felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. As the song ended, Freddie didn't rise immediately. He stayed seated, breathing slowly, hands resting on the keys. The applause came gently at first, then surged into something immense and reverent. Freddie stood. The world tilted again, but less violently this time. Brian moved closer. "Ready?" Freddie nodded his thanks. "I need a moment," Freddie said into the microphone. He turned away from the crowd and walked, slowly, carefully, toward the edge of the stage where the medic waited. The audience watched, hearts pounding. Freddie reached the wings and stopped. He turned back one last time, lifting the microphone again. "Don't go anywhere," he said with a faint grin. "I'm not finished with you yet." The crowd roared. Behind the curtain, the medic grabbed him instantly, checking his pupils, his balance, the soaked bandage. "This is serious," she said urgently. "You've lost more blood than you realize." Freddie nodded, surprisingly calm. "Then work quickly. You need stitches, possibly scans." Freddie glanced toward the stage, where the band waited, the crowd chanting his name with unwavering insistence. 5 minutes, he said. "That's all I ask." The medic hesitated, then nodded. As she worked, Freddie leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing measured. Every instinct screamed exhaustion. Every rational voice told him to stop. But another voice, quieter, steadier, spoke too. Finish what you started. The band waited. The crowd waited. And Freddie Mercury, bleeding, unsteady, undeniably human, made a choice that would define this night forever. When the curtain rose again, fans would witness something no injury, no fear, no blood could overshadow. Because Freddie Mercury was about to return to the stage, not as an untouchable legend, but as a man who refused to surrender. The stadium waited in a way it never had before, not with restless impatience, not with rowdy anticipation, but with concern that pulsed like a shared heartbeat. Behind the curtain, Freddie Mercury stood still as the medic worked quickly, her movements efficient but tense. The bandage had been removed, revealing a deep cut near his hairline that looked far worse under the harsh backstage lights than it ever had on stage. "You're lucky," she said quietly. "Another inch, and this would have been much worse." Freddie exhaled slowly. "Luck and I have a complicated relationship." She didn't smile. Brian hovered nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight. "This is madness," he said. "You've already proven whatever you wanted to prove." Freddie shook his head gently. "I haven't." Roger glanced toward the stage entrance, where the crowd's chant rolled endlessly through the concrete walls. "They won't forgive us if something happens to you." Freddie met his eyes. "They already forgave me for bleeding in front of them." Silence settled over the group. The medic finished the stitches, wiped the blood away, and pressed a fresh bandage into place. Cleaner now, tighter, impossible to miss, but no longer dangerous. "You have maybe 15 minutes, she warned. "After that, I pull you off whether you like it or not." Freddie nodded. "Fair." He rolled his shoulders slowly, testing himself. The dizziness lingered, but it was manageable now, like waves instead of a storm. He took a deep breath and felt something settle inside him. Not adrenaline. Acceptance. When the curtain began to rise again, a gasp swept through the crowd. Freddie stepped back onto the stage. The lights hit him immediately, revealing the fresh bandage stark against his dark hair. There was no attempt to hide it now. No illusion left to protect. The audience rose as one. Not screaming, not shrieking. Standing. Applause erupted, not wild, not chaotic, but thunderous in its unity. People clapped above their heads, some crying openly, others shouting his name with voices thick from emotion. Freddie froze for a moment. He hadn't expected this. He had thought they might cheer out of habit, or worry, or confusion. But this was respect. He walked slowly to the microphone, the band rejoining him in silence. "I see you," Freddie said softly. The crowd quieted instantly. "I know tonight hasn't been easy to watch," he continued, "but I want you to understand something." He paused, choosing his word with care. "I didn't come back because I felt invincible," Freddie said. "I came back because I felt held." A murmur swept through the stadium. "For years," he went on, "I thought strength meant never showing cracks. Tonight, you reminded me that strength can also mean standing together." Brian felt his throat tighten. Roger looked down, blinking hard. Freddie smiled, warm now, not defiant. "So let's finish this," he said. Not perfectly, but honestly. The band launched into the next song, and something extraordinary happened. Freddie didn't dominate the stage the way he usually did. He didn't race from one end to the other or command the crowd with flamboyant gestures. He stayed mostly still, and yet his presence felt larger than ever. Every lyric landed heavier. Every note felt deliberate. His voice carried the raw edge of someone who had been pushed to the brink and chosen to remain. The crowd followed him instinctively, clapping when he clapped, singing when he paused, quiet when his voice softened. They weren't watching a show anymore. They were participating in a moment. As the song ended, Freddie placed one hand over his heart. The applause that followed was deafening. Between songs, he wiped sweat from his brow, careful around the bandage. The medic watched from the wings, tense but hopeful. Freddie felt the exhaustion creeping back in, but now it came with clarity. This night was no longer about proving endurance. It was about meaning. As the final song approached, Freddie stepped forward once more. "This next one," he said, "is for anyone who's ever been afraid and kept going anyway." The opening chords rang out. Freddie closed his eyes as he sang the first line, grounding himself in the sound, the rhythm, the thousands of voices ready to carry him if he faltered. Halfway through the song, he opened his eyes and looked out over the sea of faces. He saw relief, admiration, and something deeper, connection. In that moment, the injury didn't matter. The blood didn't matter. What mattered was that he had allowed himself to be human in front of the world, and the world had answered with grace. As the final note echoed into silence, Freddie stood motionless, chest rising and falling, the weight of the night settling into his bones. The crowd erupted one last time, louder than ever before. Freddie bowed, not dramatically, but sincerely. Then he turned toward the band, nodding. It was over. As he stepped off stage for the final time that night, his legs nearly gave out. Brian caught him instinctively, arm firm around his back. "Easy," Brian murmured. Freddie laughed softly. "You should see the other guy." Backstage, the medic was already moving toward him, but she slowed when she saw his face. Not pale, not panicked, peaceful. Freddie sank into a chair, eyes closing at last. The sound of the crowd faded into distant echoes. The fear had passed. But the impact of what had happened was only beginning to take shape, because by morning, the story of this night would spread far beyond the stadium, not as a tale of injury, but as a moment when Freddie Mercury showed the world that courage isn't the absence of pain, it's the choice to stand in it. And what this night would awaken in him would change how he faced every stage from that moment on. Morning came quietly, almost apologetically. Freddie Mercury woke in a private hospital room, sunlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. The world felt distant, muffled, as if wrapped in cotton. His head throbbed with a dull, manageable ache, the kind that reminded him he was still very much alive. A soft beeping echoed beside the bed. He opened his eyes slowly and stared at the ceiling, replaying fragments of the night before like flashes of a dream he wasn't sure had really happened. The cut had been stitched cleanly. The bleeding had stopped. The doctors were satisfied. Concussion ruled out, rest strongly advised. But what lingered wasn't physical pain. It was memory, the standing crowd, the silence that listened, the applause that didn't demand but gave. Brian May sat quietly in the corner, guitar case at his feet, reading a newspaper he hadn't really turned a page of in 10 minutes. When he noticed Freddie was awake, he smiled with visible relief. "Welcome back," Brian said softly. Freddie exhaled. "Did we finish the show?" Brian laughed under his breath. "You did more than that. You changed it." Later that morning, the headlines arrived, not the ones Freddie had feared. There were no accusations of recklessness, no cruel speculation. Instead, photographs showed a bandaged Freddie standing tall beneath the lights, eyes fierce, microphone lifted like a declaration. Mercury bleeds, but refuses to fall. A night of courage fans will never forget. When the show became something more, Freddie read none of them aloud. He didn't need to. What mattered more came in quieter forms. Letters, phone calls, messages passed discreetly through management. Fans wrote about fear turning into pride, about watching someone they idolized choose honesty over perfection. Nurses, firefighters, parents, people who had stood through pain of their own, thanked him for showing that strength could look vulnerable. One letter stood out. A young man wrote that he had nearly left a concert when he saw the blood. He stayed only because Freddie stayed. And in doing so, he found the courage to face something in his own life he'd been avoiding for years. Freddie folded the letter carefully and placed it beside his bed. That night, alone again, Freddie stood in front of a mirror. Not a stage mirror, not a dressing room illusion, but the quiet truth of himself. The bandage was still there, visible, honest. For years, he had believed the audience came to see something flawless, something untouchable. But last night had proven something else entirely. They came to feel, and he had finally let them. When Freddie returned home days later, the house felt different, calmer. The silence no longer pressed on him. He sat at the piano and placed his hands on the keys without urgency. No performance in mind. No deadline. Just reflection. He played softly, notes that echoed the restraint of that night. Music that didn't rush to impress. Music that allowed space. The injury healed. The stitches came out. The scar remained faintly visible. A thin line near his hairline that makeup had hide, but Freddie chose not to. On the next tour, fans noticed it, and they understood. The performances changed subtly. Freddie still commanded the stage, still dazzled, still laughed and flirted with entire stadiums. But there was something new beneath it. Permission. Permission to pause. Permission to breathe. Permission to be human. Years later, fans would still talk about that night. Some remembered the fear. Others remembered the silence. Most remember the moment Freddie came back out, changed, steady, unapologetically real. It became legend not because of the blood, but because of the choice. Freddie Mercury had stood at the edge of collapse and chosen connection over ego, presence over perfection, truth over illusion. And in doing so, he redefined what it meant to be strong on a stage. As Freddie closed the piano lid that evening, he touched a faint scar near his temple, not with regret, but with respect. Some wounds close quietly, others leave behind meaning. And this one had given him something priceless. A reminder that legends aren't made when nothing goes wrong. They're made when everything does, and you stand anyway.